today is our fifth of the 7 workshops. And so we're grateful to all of you for coming along. I hope they've been helpful and I hope you're spreading the word on them. Our first speaker this morning is Nicole. Let me find this. And Nicole will be speaking on the Windrush scandal and the Home Office report. So Nicole Moore is going to speak to us on the Windrush scandal and the Home Office report. Immediately after her little talk, we'll have a little discussion. And we're not going to go into groups, we'll stay together because Nicole has to leave quite early today. After a 10-minute discussion on what we've heard from Nicole, we'll have Barbara Kentish, and Barbara Kentish will be speaking to us on the Nationality and Borders Act, and we'll do the same with her. Barbara will speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a short 10-minute discussion after Barbara. I hope that is okay with everybody, and I'll now hand over to Nicole. Gloria, if it is possible, could you please mute everybody so that we hear Nicole clearly? Thank you.
Thank you, Yogi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, CARJ, for the opportunity. So this morning, it's just my sharing on what I've come to know thus far on the Windrush scandal and what I call the elusive Windrush report. Thank you, Gloria. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so what is a Windrush scandal? Well, the following excerpt is taken from the 2018 Windrush Lessons Learned Review by Wendy Williams, Inspector of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services. And this case that you see on the screen that I've flagged up here from her review can be extrapolated to the thousands of people affected. So she writes that what we now know as a Windrush scandal began to emerge as a national issue in late 2017. On the 1st of December 2017, the Guardian newspaper covered the case of Anthony Bryan, and I'll say the Guardian newspaper really, well, we'll come to her in a little while through largely through the efforts of a journalist by the name of Amelia Gentleman. So the Guardian covered the case of Anthony Bryan, who had lived in the UK for 53 years, but was told he was in the country illegally. He was detained at an immigration center, booked on a flight to Jamaica. By early 2018, attention became more widespread in the media and in Parliament, and more articles began to appear about people who had been seriously affected by the government's hostile environment measures. I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. With reports of individuals being forced into crisis and crises, in fact, of all levels of crisis, because the government didn't accept their legal right to live in the UK. Thank you, Gloria. So this lady that we see here, Wendy Williams, she was the independent advisor who wrote Windrush Lessons, who wrote the Windrush Lessons Learned Review. And she was actually commissioned by the government to write this independent review. But as recently as March this year, she wrote this review in 2018, but as recently as March this year, she said there is a risk of something happening that shouldn't happen in the future. And she said this in a Channel 4 News interview, primarily because the recommendations, she made 30 recommendations in her review, and for the most part, they have not been taken up. It's, you know, that there is the feeling among many that sometimes just lip service is paid to travesties of justice, really. So Theresa May was 2 years into her role as Home Office Secretary when, in an interview with The Telegraph, this was in 2012, she divulged that her aim, quote, was to create here in Britain a really hostile environment for illegal migration, end quote. And this approach, this hostile environment approach, peaked with the Windrush scandal, and it was seen as a catalyst for the travesty which has damaged and disrupted so many lives. And I don't know, I mean, I personally never saw one of these trucks can we just go back to that picture a minute, to that slide a minute, Gloria? Thank you. I personally never saw one of these trucks, but these were trucks that were going around this country, you know, basically kind of threatening, you know, face arrest, go home or face arrest. So yeah, that's the kind of, for me, that's such a vulgar kind of politics. But anyway, thank you, Gloria. So we come now to Amelia Gentleman and her contribution. So Amelia Gentleman is a Guardian journalist whose dogged investigations, I say, exposes the mire that those referred to as the Windrush generation found themselves in. So some of that mire included the inability to access or continue receiving health care, housing, and public services. Employment was no longer an option to them, nor even was the right to drive. And proof of the validity of their status as British citizens had been destroyed by the Home Office over the years. And in a 2018 article written by Gentleman for The Guardian, she wrote, "The Home Office destroyed thousands of landing card slips." Sorry, I'm just trying to move this little. Thousands of landing card slips recording Windrush immigrants' arrival dates in the UK, despite staff warnings that the move would make it harder to check the records of older Caribbean-born residents experiencing residency difficulties. A former Home Office employee said the records stored in the basement of a government tower block were a vital resource for caseworkers when they were asked to find information about someone's arrival date in the UK from the West Indies. I, of course, prefer to say the Caribbean. Usually when the individual was struggling to resolve immigration status problems. So all of the landing card slips had been destroyed. Proof that that the Windrush citizens had a right to be here as legal citizens of the UK. Thank you, Gloria. So in 2018, less than 2 weeks after Amelia Gentleman's article that I just read from, and under increased pressure to explain her role in the injustice suffered by Windrush generation citizens, the then Home Office Secretary, Amber Rudd, dramatically resigned because she had denied any knowledge of deportation targets during, you know, when it all came up in 2018. But a letter that she wrote to the then Prime Minister Theresa May in 2017 was leaked, and it evidenced that she intended to increase deportations by 10%. Theresa May herself was struggling with political fallout with the scandal, and she was eventually forced to apologize for the treatment of the Windrush citizens after initially refusing to meet with several of the leaders of those countries affected. So we see the kind of headspace that politicians who are supposed to be kind of custodians of the society, you see the headspace they're in. Some people lie all the time, as we know in politics, but they get voted in or they get foisted upon us, whichever. Thank you, Gloria. So just how many people are or have been affected by the Windrush scandal? Wikipedia says that although they were primarily identified as the Windrush generation and mainly from the Caribbean, it was estimated in April 2018 on figures provided by the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford that up to 57,000 Commonwealth migrants could be affected, of whom 15,000 were from Jamaica. Now, I think that when we talk about the Windrush scandal, it's true. People tend to just kind of think of people, you know, from the Caribbean, but obviously Commonwealth citizens. So that's, you know, people from all over the world, everywhere that Britain went. As Diane Abbott once said, we are here because you were there. And so, or, you know, people from Pakistan, everywhere, people from, you know, South Asian, what would be understood as South Asian countries, people from African countries, there are, you know, hundreds, thousands of people who have been affected by this. Thank you, Gloria. So Yvette Cooper in November last year, as chair of the Home Office Affairs Committee, really spoke strongly about the fact that very few people comparatively have received any compensation for the hardships that they endured at the hands of the Home Office. And 23, up to when she spoke, 23 of the individuals who would be deemed Windrush generation individuals have died without receiving any compensation. And she said that urgent action is needed to get the compensation to those who've been so badly wronged. And it, you know, she kind of made the point that the same kind of mindset and the same kind of systematic ineffectuality that kind of pushed the Windrush scandal to where it got to seems to be happening with the compensation scheme. And so she ended by saying, we're calling for urgent changes to improve the scheme and to speed up payments to those who have been so badly treated by the Home Office in the past. The treatment of the Windrush generation by successive governments was truly shameful. The government should implement these changes to the scheme immediately to ensure that injustices are swiftly compensated instead of compounded. And well, we'll hear a little more about that in a minute. Thank you, Gloria. And so Amelia Gentleman, full disclosure around Amelia Gentleman, she is the sister-in-law. She's one of the sisters-in-law of Boris Johnson. She's married to a younger brother of his. So yeah, there's just that link, but she is really a superb, to my mind and to many others, a superb journalist. She is unrelenting, and she has not stopped, you know, reporting and recording stories coming out of the Windrush scandal. And so in June this year, she gave the case of this man whose picture you see here, Cuthbert Prosper, 59, who arrived from St. Lucia as a 4-year-old in 1967 and has been unable to persuade compensation staff that he lost his job as a security guard at St. Martin in the Fields Church in Trafalgar Square because of his documentation issues. So this is what Yvette Cooper was saying. It's almost like the same kind of mistakes are being repeated. This is despite a letter from the former Bishop of Salisbury confirming that Mr. Prosper is a respected or was a respected member of staff. So fewer, Amelia Gentleman reports, fewer than 7% of the 15,000 compensation claims the government originally expected have received payment. So there you have it. But let's see what the Home Office is saying. Thank you, Gloria. So in a blog, Home Office in the Media blog, in July, they talk about the fact that they're determined to put the terrible injustices faced by some people from the Windrush generation in the wider Commonwealth. They're determined to put that right and to help right those wrongs. They've announced that the Windrush documentation scheme will remain open indefinitely. They say that the total amount paid or offered to claimants through the scheme has increased to 53.78 million. And they say that 43.9 million pounds has been paid across 1,098 claims, and that a further 9.8 million pounds has been offered, awaiting acceptance or pending review. The statistics also show that 52.5% of claims have had a final decision. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the final decision has been, okay, you can have this compensation. That's how I read this. It doesn't, a final decision doesn't mean that it's been a decision in favor of the claimant. But anyway, during the month of June, the Home Office paid out over 1.6 million pounds in compensation. And that's from the Home Office in the Media blog of July. That was at the end of July this year. Thank you, Gloria. So the elusive Windrush report and what we've learned from the leaks. I've put 2 articles by Amelia Gentleman that were published in the Guardian in May. And the government commissioned report on the Windrush scandal, titled The Historical Roots of the Windrush Scandal, was a report, or is a report that was written by an anonymous historian. It has been completed for over a year. It's been signed off on for over a year by officials. It's been made accessible to Home Office staff, but repeated requests for it to be made public have been routinely declined. And the Home Office has acknowledged that it's a matter of legitimate public interest, but says that it includes sensitive issues involving the development of policies, and that publication could inhibit the ability of ministers to take free and frank advice. But, you know, there have been leaks. And so some of what we've learned from those leaks, and thanks to journalists like Amelia Gentleman, it found the report that the deep-rooted racism of the Windrush scandal had its roots in the fact that during the period 1950 to 1981, every single piece of immigration or citizenship legislation was designed, at least in part, to reduce the number of people with black or brown skin who were permitted to live and work in the UK. And the report would go on to cite the different immigration acts, the 1962 Immigration Act, the Commonwealth Immigration Act, the 1968 Commonwealth Immigrants Act, the 1971 Immigration Act, and the 1981 Immigration Act. I just want to read something else that comes out of the report. The unnamed Home Office historian writes this: the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function, which in turn produced legislation aimed at keeping racial and ethnic groups apart. And so from the beginning, concern about Commonwealth immigration has been about skin color. The document summarizes decades of, quote, dysfunctional relationships between Britain's institutions and Black and minority ethnic people, and it concludes the politics of Britain's borders, which have been administered for more than a century by the Home Office and now inextricably connected with race and with Britain's colonial history. And Wendy Williams, the woman, the inspector of the constabulary, who was commissioned to write the review, Windrush Lessons Learned Review, said in March that she was disappointed, deeply disappointed, that the report had not been published, you know, more than a year after officials had signed off on it. But please do go yourselves and find online both articles by Amelia Gentleman, written on the 29th of May. So basically, I think one was written for, you know, like the broadsheet, and one was written as an online article for The Guardian. But they both give very real information coming out of those leaks. And it's a 52-page analysis. And it says, it finds that the scandal was caused by a failure to recognize that changes to British immigration law over the past 70 years had a more negative impact on Black people than on other racial and ethnic groups. But I mean, the report
just do butt in there. Sorry about this. Just watch the time, darling, please.
Okay, what time is it now? How much time do I have, Yogi?
You've overrun by 2 minutes already.
All right, okay, so can we move on, Gloria? So please look for those articles by Amelia Gentleman, 29th of May, 2022. So this is my last slide. And in one of her articles, she says, the Windrush scandal's origins lie in 3 decades of racist immigration legislation. And as I said before, and I want to very quickly mention the power of the pen here. On the 11th, Monday, the 11th of July, there was an article in the Guardian about a young woman called Tiffany Ellis, 28 years old, citizen of the UK, went to Jamaica on holiday with her husband and their daughter. She was pregnant as well, was very ill, ended up having to stay in Jamaica to have her baby there. And the Home Office refused the baby entry to the UK. They said that the baby had an established life in Jamaica, that Tiffany Ellis could come back. So this is this year we're talking about, that Tiffany Ellis could come back, but not the baby. The article, The Guardian exposed this in an article by Diane Taylor. And the next day, 12th of July, Tiffany Ellis was called by the Home Office to say, come and get a visa for your baby. The baby can travel. So the power of the pen. And so I end this morning by saying, making note of the fact that we really do need to continue as we are on this God-given morning, I say, to make the time to understand the machinations of injustice and oppression that are always at work in society. And I ask that God give us the focus and strategy and strength to remain active in our resistance to injustice and oppression. Amen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you ever so much, Nicole. Sorry to have interrupted. It was so interesting. Time is always of the essence in these sessions. I'm going to now open up to questions and comments, and Gloria will be watching everybody. So if you put up your hand or put a question in, Gloria will pass it on to Nicole. We have 10 minutes for that. I can see Maggie. So I'll start with Maggie, and Gloria can take all the others down, please.
Great presentation. Thanks very much indeed, Nicole. I was less focused on the compensation, but the last case you mentioned really highlighted for me how much this is still happening. Are we aware of the impact of people still suffering because their status isn't regularized, inverted commas? So I don't know if you have any information about that, or
I mean, there are quite a number of cases. I mean, this case, it's interesting, you know, because I went out in my role as CARJ associate to a Jesuit college recently, and I think it was the 14th of July that I had gone, and so this was the week that this case with Tiffany Ellis was abroad, if you like, and the boys, you know, the young men and sixth formers at this Jesuit college, they were shocked. You could see they were shocked because in their minds, and I would imagine in the minds of lots of people think like this, that it's done, that you know, this thing that we call the Windrush scandal is done and dusted, and it really isn't, because the Tiffany Ellis case is just one case, and it just so happened that somebody got in touch with somebody at the Guardian, and you know, and so a report was, you know, an article was written. But also the case of the man that I highlighted there in Amelia Gentleman's article, Mr. Prosper. I mean, he's still in this predicament. And I would imagine that if he is in the predicament, there will be thousands perhaps in the predicament. And that is what Yvette Cooper really was kind of alluding to in her address as chair of the Home Office, as though, you know, there's a replication of the mistakes, you know, there's in the context of the compensation scheme, you're seeing a replication of mistakes. And that report that was commissioned by the government, the report which they refused to make public, was really for the education, well, they say for the education of staff. That's what they say, Home Office staff and so on. But based on what you're kind of hearing, you know, trickling through about what's happening with the compensation scheme, I don't know what's, you know, I don't have numbers, but I can imagine that Mr. Prosper is not the only one. I can imagine in that context. And I'm pretty certain that Tiffany Ellis isn't the only one that's happening.
Phil has his hand up that I can see. Could we have Phil's question, please?
And we also have Beverly, please.
Okay, Phil, you're still muted. Okay, great.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Thanks, Yogi. Thank you very much, Nicole, for all that. It's a huge topic and it deserves a lot more time, and I know time is always short.
Yeah.
My question, I've got a couple of things, but one is just to clarify something about the numbers you quoted. First of all, you said that there's about 57,000 people who are affected
that
by
they
the Windrush. And later you said the government, or this was in one of the things, the government for the compensation scheme expected 15,000 claims.
Yeah.
Now, there's a big disparity between the number of people affected and the number of claims that you said the government have said that's what they were expecting.
I don't have an explanation for that disparity. I mean, I think that one of the important things about the numbers that came out of the Oxford migratory that organization is that it really kind of made people understand that when we're talking about this, yes, it's called the Windrush scandal, but I think it was about also getting people to understand that it's people from the Commonwealth, right? But then I don't know in terms of because I think people don't always get that. And I read not that long ago, it was an article by or either by or about someone from Pakistan who's had a very similar, just the same kind of problems. But I don't know in terms of the numbers who have applied, because the other thing is that people, and this is what I've heard, people have spoken about navigating the compensation scheme form, you know, that it's a lot of people have found it very difficult. So I don't know if obviously I have no idea how the Home Office really operates. You know, like how when you have an Eventbrite, when you put something up on Eventbrite and loads of people kind of, you think, okay, 300 people have got tickets, but then not everybody's going to show up on the day. I have no idea if that is a kind of, we have those numbers in terms of Commonwealth, but how many people have actually made the claim or been able to make the claims?
Can I follow up my question then? Is there any organization or any group of solicitors who have got together to bring what they call a class action, helping the victims of this scandal to make the claim, to help them navigate through the claim process?
No, I don't have details on that, but I suspect yes, because and because I remember hearing something, not like a class action, but I know that there were definitely groups of people getting together, Windrush citizens, and I think that there were quite a few who would have had like the same legal representatives, if you see what I mean. But I don't know if a class action has been brought in. If not, you know, certainly not too late. I think it should. I think that's something that really should happen.
Okay, I'm going to ask because I don't want to shortchange Barbara in her talk.
Yeah.
Beverly had a question. If we could have that very, very quickly, please, Beverly.
Right. Okay. Just to say, wonderful. Very, very much appreciated. Makes me feel very, very sad to hear it. I wonder if I was interested in the figures, also the difference between sort of 59% in the government blog. I know it was for just any decision, and 7% receiving compensation. Have we been able to push them to know how many did receive compensation? That's one of my questions. I think that's it. Just amazing sadness, and really whether there's a way that CARJ could give us, find out more information on what is continuing to happen, so we don't forget about it, and where people can get help in filling in the compensation forms. I think that both of those would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. I think we'll take that up and see what we can do about that. I'm going to just say a very, very big thank you for Nicole. I know that she'll be running away. I'm so grateful to you for doing this so wonderfully for us in your busy schedule. I know you have to leave soon. Thanks very much, Nicole.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
And I'm now going to call on Barbara Kentish, and Barbara Kentish is now going to speak to us on Nationality and Borders Act. Barbara? You're muted, Barbara.
I'm muted. Oh, you want to hear my wonderful words. Excuse me. I'm not sure that there seemed to be a little bit of hope towards the end of that about people that had received compensation, even though it's a pathetically small percentage. On the Nationality and Borders Act, I'm afraid there's not a lot of good news, except that it reveals even more clearly the hugely negative motives our government has, and that we can just be clear about what we're facing. So I'll just see if I can get my screen up. Here we go. So this UK Nationality and Borders Act was brought in April this year, with lots and lots of protests from organisations that many of you may be involved with, and things I'm involved with. We protested, we wrote, we talked to politicians. I've been involved variously with Safe Passage, together with refugees, the London Catholic Worker, and so on. However, it's gone through, and even some of the good bits that had been in previous immigration legislation were dropped. So the family reunification and the Dubs Amendment are gone. These are the things, and I'm going to go through pretty fast, so we've got a bit of time to comment. These are the sections. Nationality, it's a bit of a housekeeping thing. Asylum, which is the biggest one, immigration, age assessment, modern slavery, and then miscellaneous and general. So there are 7 sections. The nationality one was a little bit of a sort of tidying up exercise, dealing with things like stateless minors, notice to deprive a person of citizenship. People remember the Shamima Begum issue, so that's still there. Applications for citizenship for spouses and family members. All of that is a sort of tidying up exercise as I saw it. The second section, very detailed, and the Law Society put a summary of it for us, which I found very handy. So, and these are some of the basic things. It introduced a 2-tier asylum system, meaning those who arrive in the UK via irregular means may receive less protection and support. So anyone who comes in a boat, back of a lorry, etc., is less favoured. It increases the standard of proof for establishing that somebody is a refugee, and not, as they put it rather derogatively, an economic refugee. It reduces the threshold at which someone is considered to have committed a particularly serious crime, therefore may not receive refugee protection. It removes the stages of appeal or fast tracking of certain cases. There are several stages of appeal, which I'll hopefully get onto later, and these are being reduced. It introduces penalties for late submission of evidence. So this is either taken to damage the claimant's credibility or to affect the weight given to the evidence. So if you don't say you've been raped and tortured right at the beginning, only introduce that later, then that can affect your claim. And it gives the Immigration Tribunal additional powers on top of those that already exist to fine lawyers for improper, unreasonable or negligent behaviour. So that's the total. So here we are on the differential treatment of refugees. Group 1, a refugee is a Group 1 refugee if they have complied with both of the requirements and, where applicable, the additional requirement. So both requirements are they have come to the United Kingdom directly from a country or territory where their life or freedom was threatened in the sense of Article 1 of the Refugee Convention. I.e., if you're brought in on a plane from Afghanistan or Syria, then you are in Group 1 and you can be considered. Or you have presented yourself, you've presented yourself without delay to the authorities. Well, you presumably come in on one of those, from one of those countries, and you hand yourself over to the police. Where a refugee has entered or is present in the United Kingdom unlawfully, the additional requirement is that they can show good cause for their unlawful entry or presence. And this is where those who come in on a boat announce themselves to the police immediately, which they do, of course, we've seen it on television. They're picked up, they're processed. if they can show that they've been persecuted, etc., then they can be considered for asylum. Needless to say, a lot of the appeal, well, I'll get onto that later. It's group 2. A person's entry or into or presence in the United Kingdom is unlawful if they require leave to enter or remain and do not have it. Well, if you present yourself on the shores of Dover, Ramsgate, etc., in a small boat, you don't have permission to be there, you are unlawful. So they're criminalizing that. At the moment, appeals can be made, and that's why everybody is flooding in now. If you arrive unlawfully, as from this act, you are a criminal. So I'm trying to reserve comment until I get to the end. It's quite difficult because I think some of it is so unworkable. The Secretary of State or an immigration officer may treat group 1 and group 2 refugees differently. For example, A, the length of any period of limited leave to enter or remain which is given to the refugees. So this is all discretionary here. Group 1 can be allowed unlimited leave. Group 2 is going to be very limited. B, the requirements that the refugee must meet in order to be given indefinite leave to remain. Again, very different. No recourse to public funds. That can be attached to any period of limited leave to enter or remain. And whether leave to enter or remain is given to members of the refugee's family. So lots and lots of very detailed decisions are different for group 1. So presumably if you're an Afghan and your family is still over in Afghanistan, you can apply for them to come. If you are from Eritrea and your family is over in Eritrea, you will be given less consideration. I think there's just a huge amount of discretion in all of this. The requirement to make an asylum claim at a designated place. Where can you make a claim? Any of the following places in the United Kingdom: an asylum intake unit, a removal centre, a port, a place where there is a person present who, for the purposes of the immigration rules, is authorised to accept an asylum claim. I'm trying to, now how do I get back? The point of all that, I've jumped and I'm slightly complicated to get it back. The point of all that is there are very few places, if at all, outside the United Kingdom where you can make a claim. And I'll go into examples now. Ukrainians, for instance, that wanted to come and claim asylum in the UK. If you remember, those who travelled across land, came to northern France, could not find anywhere to make a claim. A place was set up in Lille for them to make a claim, which they could not find, and which they had to do on paper or online. If you remember all that, they couldn't walk in off the street to make a claim. That was the Ukrainians, high profile, desperate, lots of sympathy. They could not make a claim. If you are an Ethiopian, an Iranian, a Syrian, Afghan in northern France, there is nowhere you can make a claim. So these rather cheap throwaway comments people make about why don't they stay in France? They're in France. Why don't they stay there? Why don't they apply properly? Why don't they come by proper means? There is nowhere. So if you're hoping to come to the UK, then you can't. Hence, all this traffic, that small boat traffic across the channel. Accommodation. This can be according to the status and stage of the asylum seeker's claim. I'm trying to bother. I want to go back. So if they've not been cooperative in previous stages, they may be placed in removal centres until their claim or situation is resolved. The Home Office is actually desperate, I know, for accommodation, and they're using all sorts of places. As we know, they're using barracks, which are in terrible state of repair. There are some good places. Iranians, I know, have been rehoused in ex-army accommodation on the south coast, somewhere near Chichester, and they're very happy. This is great. There are some areas, obviously, where there's more housing than others. However, they're often very poor and very lacking public transport and amenities and so on. So and people that are in hotels, some of them are still there. So it's very, very haphazard and ad hoc. So I know there's a problem. I can think of ways around it, but there we are. Oh, before I just forgot to mention, the UK is the only place in Europe that has indefinite detention, where if the case is not resolved, the person can stay in detention, haven't committed any crime, but they're in what virtually a prison. Well, it is a prison, not just virtual, until their claim can be processed. So other provisions in the asylum section, what is inadmissible, if you come from the EU, that you can't. If you have connections to a safe third state, so if you've got connections in Germany, Greece, wherever, you've got family there, you can't claim here. All the things you have to provide to support evidence. I just want to say a little bit about the right of appeal. If you look at section 4, 3 levels of appeal.
You have 1 minute to do that, Barbara.
Oh my goodness. I was just going to say that the Home Office, in my view, and I was trying to avoid personal views all the time, but it's in disarray. It simply is not dealing with this. I've got a lodger here who is on a panel, is on the final panel. He says, cases are coming, this is talking about third level of appeal, final appeal, cases are coming through from the Home Office where the evidence is just rubbish. It's it's not accumulated properly, it's self-contradictory, etc. And then we all know about the removal to safe countries such as Rwanda. That's in law now. If it's not Rwanda, it could be something else. There's age assessment. They can use scientific assessment. Problem of dealing with children versus dealing with adults. Children get more consideration. How do we know they're under 18? Scientific assessment. Modern slavery, they can stay for a limited period for reasons such as medical and psychological help or helping police with inquiries. They can't stay forever. Miscellaneous. Visa penalties for uncooperative countries. Counter-terrorism questioning, and so on. The final one, I love this. It's like when you get, you see a job application, a job description, and you see at the bottom, and all other duties as the Secretary of State may, by regulations, make such provision as the Secretary of State deems appropriate. So I'm going to cut off there, stop share. I'm totally out of time, Beverly. Am I totally out of time? I'll just make a couple of conclusions. Most asylum seekers do not come to the UK. We've got a very small proportion. If I get the figures, Turkey hosts, I'm saying hosts, not necessarily grants asylum, but hosts 3.9 million, Germany 2 million, France, where we would like, apparently would like them to stay, hosts 500K, 174,000 are the number we host. So go from Turkey 3.9 million and UK 174,000. My sense in this act is that we are desperately trying to plug the gaps, you know, like plugging the dikes of Holland. We're desperately trying to plug these gaps. We cannot plug the gaps. Just as thousands have come over the Mediterranean, a few thousand have come over the Channel. How do you plug this gap of people? Walls do not keep them out. And it's a bit like King Canute trying to send back the tide, is my sense about this act. We know that this is, most of the motivation for this act is racist. How do we keep out this volume of people that we apparently can't cope with? This act does not look at our economic needs. How many scientists do we need? How many, I don't know, rail workers do we need or whatever? It doesn't look at anything like that. It looks at how can we keep out these undesirables? And these are the measures that we are going to use. It's not effective because we are adhering, the final point, it's not effective because at the moment we are adhering to all the Refugee Convention principles, the human rights principles that we signed up to in 1950, that Winston Churchill signed up to, the European Convention on Human Rights. We're signing up to that, so that of all these people coming across the Channel, 70% win their appeal. If they're turned down, I think over those that are accepted first time, plus the appeal winners, comes to 70% of them. They're escaping torture, they're escaping persecution, they're getting in. And who knows about the other 30%? They might just have not come up with the right evidence at the right time, who knows? But most of them are not economic migrants, they're escaping persecution, and they're okay, they're in. That's why they're coming. There's a success story in one sense. That's because we've signed up to the Human Rights Convention and we're sticking to it. What happens if we leave that? That's going to be another, I suspect that's another goal for this government. How can they get out of that? How can they, at the moment we're in the Council of Europe, which is the body upholding the European Convention. We're one of 49 nations, we helped to set it up, we helped to write the rules, and now how can we get out of it? That's the thinking. So I think that's what we've got to watch, more than all the humanitarian things, which are hugely important, like where are we housing them, get them out of detention, you know, give them proper rights when they're here. The long term is, can we keep on being signed up to the Convention on Human Rights? That's my overall thing about this. And this act is clearly, to me, it's a step on the way not to get out of that. So I'll stop.
Thank you ever so much, Barbara. And we could listen to you go on for another hour. It's really, really interesting. I'm so sorry that we don't have the time. We literally have 6 minutes now for any discussion or any questions. So I'd ask people to be as brief as they possibly can, please. Anyone? I can see Phil's hand. I don't know. Gloria, do you have any hands?
No, not at the moment. Just Phil.
Okay. Phil, could you be as brief as you possibly can, please?
I will. This is obviously a political situation. The Conservative Party have moved more and more to the right. They're appealing to the extremes in our society. We do need the church, the bishops, and everyone in the church to begin to make a noise about the justice, our Catholic social principles of human dignity must be highlighted before we vote for the next government, whatever that is.
Thank you, Phil. Anybody else? Are there any comments in the chat? Beverly?
Yes, this is a question, I think, thank you very much indeed, Barbara. There's so much to cover. It's a question, I think, possibly more about the nationality section And because I am not sure, I've heard some things, I'm not sure if they're correct. I wonder if you can give us more information. Something about that you can be deported and without reasons being given, without proper notice, to claim citizenship elsewhere rather than are a citizen elsewhere, your status in Britain then becomes suspect and more liable to deportation. These are things I heard in the run-up to the act. Maybe they didn't get in. I don't know. I wonder if you could
I'm
enlighten me.
afraid I can't give you a lot of information, well, any information on that. It's not something that came up in general comment and reading. Because I belong to all these refugee organizations, they're all commenting on the asylum section as opposed to the nationality. You can still, in this country, have two nationality. You can have dual nationality, as you know. So the threat to a second nationality, I don't know. I'll just say that I totally agree with what Nicole said before. I think the aim to stop adding any nationals to certain allowing, I'm putting this very badly, allowing people from what used to be called New Commonwealth is very strong. There's a tendency to chop wherever you can and to exclude. And I got a similar story to the one mentioned about Tiffany Ellis in my own family, where somebody was stonewalled for a long time. She finally got the passport, but yeah, I think there's also a huge dysfunction in the Home Office. I just think the Home Office is incredibly inefficient, and it's because lots and lots of different messages are coming from the top in all different areas. I just wonder if it really functions properly at all. But that doesn't answer your question, I'm sorry. I'll look it up.
Anybody else want to make comment?
Yeah. I'm sorry, can I just get back to what Phil was saying about the church? There is a move from some people to get a charter, a church's charter on the refugee issue, which I think would be great. It's not been done yet, to my knowledge. Our Bishop Paul McAleenan has spoken up very well on a number of occasions as the bill was working through, and as we were trying to get different amendments in, and he's spoken up very well. However, there's no overall opposition to the act and to the sentiment behind the act, which is obviously needed on a broader front. If we could get some sort of a charter, the way there has been in the past on climate and on other issues, it would be really important for us to cooperate with that.
Thank you, Barbara. I think Sister Teresa.
Yeah, I just wanted to say regarding the Windrush scandal, I think it's terrible that that man of 60 lost his job due to documentation. So more effort is needed now to get documentation for all those who are still haven't got the documentation, because all these injustices are coming up.
Thank you ever so much, everybody. We have 1 minute, so I just want to say a very big thank you to Barbara for all the preparation and for giving us this fantastic talk. I know that everybody who's here will really appreciate that, and hopefully those who are not with us will have it on the website and listen to it. Thanks ever so much, Barbara. The second thing, thank you, Val. If anybody knows of anybody who is interested in these talks, we still have 2 more. We have one on the 1st of September and another on the 17th of September. And that will complete our 7 talks on the latest government reports. So please advertise that to anybody else that might be interested. We also would like you to put into your diaries now that we have our AGM on the first Saturday in November. And we're hoping to have that in person in Manor House, at the office. So we're hoping that it will be there. So please put it into your diaries now so that you can all be there. A very, very big thank you to all of you for giving up Saturday morning to be with us and to listen to our two fantastic speakers. Thank you all. I hope you're going to enjoy the rest of your weekend. God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Yogi. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.